Early on the morning of April 7th of 1862, Major General Grant would meet with General Lew Wallace and order him to advance due west. Grant wanted to take the fight back to the Confederates and recapture lost ground. Would he be able to push them back, or would this be another day full of retreating Union troops? Let's find out.
So we are currently standing in the area that would have been the extreme right flank of the Union Army. Now that road in the distance, that is the Pittsburgh Landing Road, and that leads to Pittsburgh Landing. Now manning this area would be Lew Wallace's division, and his division was fresh. These were some of the freshest troops to arrive here at Shiloh, and Grant wanted to utilize this. Now Grant and Wallace would meet in this location, and Grant would give Wallace orders to advance his men west, which is the location we are looking at now. Now Grant wanted an aggressive attack, but unfortunately for Wallace's men, they would have to cross some pretty rough terrain, including Tilghman Branch. And now today Tilghman Branch is called Glover Branch, but that lies just straight ahead. So here on the morning of April 7th of 1862, Wallace would receive orders from Grant to begin advancing his men west and taking the fight to the Confederate troops. So what you're seeing here is a section of Tilghman Branch. Now I've also seen this area pronounced Tillman Branch. I'm not sure where the G goes, but here you have Tilghman Branch, and Lew Wallace's division would be advancing from this location here. They would be advancing directly at you on the camera, and they would pass through things like this. Now Grant wanted a quick, aggressive attack. He wanted to catch the Confederates off guard, but unfortunately for Lew Wallace's men, this was not conducive for rapid movement here. And just giving you as best look as possible so you can see the terrain that these men would have to advance through. And they're going to continue in this direction here to a field called Jones Field, where there's a Confederate brigade and artillery battery awaiting them.
The ball opened and we marched, through swamps knee-deep, through brush, over hills and across hollows. Captain S.W. Emmons, 76th Ohio.
So right now we are in Jones Field, and we are looking at the direction where Lew Wallace's division would emerge around 9 a.m. Now originally manning this area were Confederate troops under the command of Colonel Preston Pond, and his brigade was the most advanced Confederate unit on the morning of April 7th. When all the Confederate forces received word to pull back to the captured Union camps, word never reached Pond's brigade, and they were in this general area on the morning of April 7th. And there was also a Confederate battery under the command of Captain William Ketchum, and his Alabama battery was in this area. It took part in that early morning artillery duel with Wallace's men, and now the Confederate forces were pulling back to the southern end of Jones Field here, which is this area here. Now Pond's brigade would be pulled from this area, and Wallace would detect this departure, and he would order another artillery bombardment of the retreating Confederate forces here, and the Confederates would begin sending artillery rounds into Wallace's men, who were now sheltering in the far wood line here at Jones Field. Now there was some skirmishing back and forth across this field. A member of the 6th Arkansas, Henry Stanley, advanced too far out in front of his unit. Remember, it's still in the early morning hours here, and he would be captured somewhere in the middle of Jones Field here. Now 2 months later, Stanley would become what would be called a galvanized Yankee. In order to get out of being captured, he joined the Union Army. And after the war, Stanley would become a celebrated journalist and explorer.
A soldier in Wallace's division noted, "We advanced yelling like we were wild, and they ran, not retiring in good order, but they ran for their lives."
So we've reached our final stop here in this episode, and we are looking at Woolfield. Now, just beyond Woolfield is an area that would be known as the Crossroads, and that was the scene of some pretty heavy fighting on the first day of the Battle of Shiloh here. The Confederate forces managed to push back Sherman and McClernand's divisions from this area. They would launch a counterattack, push back the Confederate forces, and the Confederates would in turn push them back. So now in the morning of April 7th of 1862, at approximately 10 a.m., the Confederates were forming their line of defense along the Hamburg-Purdy Road. And in this general direction here, you finally had the divisions of Sherman and McClernand pushing through this woods here, which on the other side lies Jones Field, and they would emerge from this area at around 10 a.m. Now, Lew Wallace began moving his division further west in an attempt to flank the Confederate forces, and in turn, it temporarily took him out of the action here. So you had the two shattered remnants of Sherman and McClernand's divisions advancing into the Confederate defense, which lies ahead. So we are standing in the position of Colonel Edward Kirk's brigade, and they would be advancing directly into Water Oaks Pond here. And this is a position of the 34th Illinois Infantry, and they would be advancing through this area here, through Water Oak Pond, which you see before us, and they would be absolutely decimated by a Tennessee battery on the other side of the pond here. And the commander of the 34th Illinois, Major Charles Levingway, would be killed after being struck in the neck by a shell. So the 34th Illinois and the rest of Kirk's brigade would advance, and here is Water Oak Pond. And just on the other side there, by the Tennessee Monument, you had a Confederate battery. They were just launching double and triple canister into the men of the 34th here, and they were absolutely decimated. You know, what's unfolding on these fields here is obviously absolutely horrific. But just imagine people that you know, your commander who's drilled you, who's trained you, you've been together for some time now, and he's struck in the neck by an artillery shell. Imagine how demoralizing, imagine how horrific and traumatizing that is to the men of the 34th Illinois as they try to advance through Water Oak Pond here. Now, a division from Buell's Army of the Ohio, commanded by Brigadier General Alexander McCook, would arrive from this direction here. And within his unit was the 32nd Indiana, and they would advance right through some of the shattered Union units. Now, the 32nd Indiana was commanded by Colonel August Willich, who was a Prussian-born communist, and his military experience prior to the Civil War made him a very competent commander. But here at Shiloh, he made a grave error. He would order a bayonet charge, and instead of organizing his regiment into the long linear formations, he organized his men into a double column, and they advanced right into the muzzles of awaiting Confederate muskets and the barrels of awaiting Confederate artillery. And the 32nd Indiana was also absolutely decimated here around the area of Water Oak Pond. So now you had multiple Union regiments being shattered by the Confederate defense here on April 7th of 1862.
As Union troops crossed Wolf Field, one member of the 34th Illinois noted, "We began to realize that we were earning our $13 a month." Another Illinois soldier observed, "We had to cross a field about 40 rods wide, and through a perfect storm of bullets, shot and shell, our men fell thick."
So now we are looking at Water Oaks Pond from the Confederate perspective here. And we are in the location of Rutledge's Tennessee battery, and this was the battery sending essentially point-blank shots into the Union forces advancing across Water Oaks Pond just before us. You had the 34th Illinois getting decimated, then you had the 32nd Indiana in this general area. And finally, after much delay, Lew Wallace's division finally appeared on the Confederate left flank, and in turn it made the Confederate defense here, it made their position essentially untenable, and they had to begin pulling back to the area of the Shiloh Church, which is several hundred yards in this direction here. yourself in the position of one of these gunners here. Water Oaks Pond is maybe 75 yards from this position. Imagine Union infantry advancing on your location here, and you have to load and fire this gun as fast as possible. We're in musket range, no doubt. Gunners and crew members here of this artillery battery went down, but just imagine the blue wave coming right at us, and we're just pretty much really exposed out here in the open. You have to load and fire this gun as fast as you can. For every round you deliver downrange, that's less lead coming your way. Now, to allow more time for the Confederate forces to pull back and establish another defensive line, they sent forward Sterling Wood's brigade, and his brigade could barely muster 650 men at this point in the battle. And yet, they surged forward, advanced into Water Oaks Pond, the same pond that is littered with Union casualties, and they would advance forward and they would be caught in a crossfire. They were getting hit from their front, they were getting hit from their right flank, their left flank, and they were absolutely mauled here at Water Oaks Pond. But in turn, the Union forces focused on them, and the Confederates were able to pull back to the area of Shiloh Church and begin establishing another defensive line here on April 7th of 1862. Now, the Shiloh battlefield is littered with notable monuments, but I think the Tennessee monument here before us is one of the more vivid monuments here. You can see the scene here. This unit is suffering casualties. Looks like the color bearer has been hit, and another soldier is picking up the colors here. Now, this battle is being fought on Tennessee soil, so you can imagine that these men fighting on their home turf are giving it everything they have. Not that the other men aren't, but just imagine how much harder you'd fight if there was a battle in your home state. Think about the men from Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania during Gettysburg. Think about the vested interest that they have. They are literally defending their state. And as you can see here, just a beautiful monument here on the Shiloh battlefield.
The charge was most gallantly made, crossing a pond of water in some places waist deep, and then entering an open field. Here displayed the greatest gallantry. He was on the right, and dashing through the pond, sat on horseback in the open ground, and rallied his men in line as they advanced. The enemy gave way and fell back in disorder, but soon rallied on our left, so as to pour into us a crossfire. General Sterling Wood.
Now, one of the more gruesome tasks that is left for the victorious army on the field of battle is burying the dead that now litter the field. And what you're seeing here is the former burial place of the 45th Illinois Infantry. These bodies have been removed to the National Cemetery, and behind them is a Confederate burial trench, one of 5 on the Shiloh battlefield. Now, some historians believe that there's as many as 12 total Confederate burial trenches, but they only know of 5. So what you're seeing here is one of those 5. And unknown how many are buried here. We obviously don't know their story. We don't know their names. We don't know what they did here at Shiloh. But what we do know is they were killed in action, and their families back home really never got closure. You know, this is a time before soldier identification was standard issued, and many of these men marched here, fought here on April 6th and April 7th, and now their names are forever forgotten, and they lie here in peace on the Shiloh battlefield.
If you want to learn more about the Battle of Shiloh or catch other videos in this series, check out my playlist titled April Thunder. We cover the Battle of Shiloh from the first shots till its last.